and welcome to Maybe Crafter. Today I am going to be making some little characters from a new game called Dreamed Away. Right now the demo's available and it's a very neat little game. You follow the journey of a little boy trying to find his sister in a world that has gone kind of wrong. Soon the Kickstarter will be launching so that you can help fund the full game, which I'm really excited about. So I found these little figures on Temu and they were perfect for making the two main characters, Theo and Louise. So I did have to make some alterations and I used my Dremel to cut off the little hoodie hoods that the two characters had on them. And Theo's character needed the most fixes just because of the way his outfit is in the game. So I had to slice off all the pieces of the hoodie and get him prepped. Now, I used my Dremel for most of it, but for some of the finer details, I used my X-Acto knife and very carefully cut them away so that I didn't cut my fingers, which I am apt to do, as you can see from the Band-Aid. I then used some acetone to try to get off some of the darker colors on him, and of course his face, so then we get creepy Theo there for a while with no face. And I just prepped him for a little bit, and then I, of course, picked a nice dark brown. The whole time I was painting him, I of course had a reference up so that I could make sure that I was recreating them as faithfully as possible. Now, I really liked this game because not only were the graphics really well done, and it was a very cute little game, but it's very interesting. Because at first you're like, oh, this is just going to be your standard little pixel game, you know, it's cute, blah, 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 blah. But then as you get into it, there's so much story and there's so much in-depth little hints throughout the game that it's like, you just don't know what's going on. And I just can't wait for the full game to come out because it's so interesting and I really want to know what's going on, because Theo wakes up and everything seems okay, but things are just a little off in his world. His mom's not acting right. Things are just a little weird. Then as the game progresses, things change and it's just, oh, you gotta watch it. And if you want to see the playthrough of the demo, go on Heck in the Y, our sister channel, and you'll be able to see, and I think you'll be hooked, just like I was. So I painted Theo's little overalls. They were pretty easy to do, though I had some problems with my paint being a little clumpy because it was kind of old. I actually mixed in a little bit of gesso to see if that would help, and it actually did. It kind of revived the paint a little bit because I don't like using water because it thins out the paint too much. But the gesso was an experiment and it actually worked. I was very surprised. And I painted his little shirt, which worked out because I didn't have to cut any of the sleeves off the original figure because they actually looked almost identical to the sleeves the Theo character had on in the game, which I thought was pretty cool. I really enjoyed painting these little characters because, one, I really like painting, but just as I painted them, it was just so satisfying to see the little characters change from, you know, the generic little Temu figures to the characters from the game. They came out so well. I was just blown away by how well they came out and just how adorable it turned out. Now, I alternated between regular acrylic paints and Poscas. I don't like using Poscas a lot for things like this because they do have a tendency to crack, especially if you have to use multiple layers. I've also noticed when I try to use them for details with white, the white wants to come off when you try to do multiple layers. So I did use acrylic paint for his eyes, and I alternated with the Poscas just for some of the finer details. Now, I dry brushed his cheeks on because he did have a little bit of blush. I dry brushed some pink on there so that he had his pink cheeks, but they weren't overwhelmingly. It didn't look like Theo had gotten into his mom's makeup or anything. At this point, I decided to make his lantern, which is a big part of the game. I made his lantern out of air-dry clay that I actually bought off Temu too. In case you can't tell, I have a big Temu problem. So I used some brown to kind of form it, and again, I had a reference so that I could see what I was doing. I made the bottom of the lantern with the brown, and then I used some yellow to make the light part of his lantern. Now, I really like this clay because not only does it feel really cool, but then when it dries, it almost has kind of a foamy feeling. Now, if you are going to use it outside, which sometimes I do just for my fairy garden and things, you do need to seal it with some kind of waterproof sealer, because since it is air dry, it is water-based and it will just disintegrate if you put it outside, because, you know, water, moisture, rain will basically just ruin it. So if you're going to use it for outdoor things, you want to seal it. So after I was done doing Theo, I started on his sister Louise. I only really had to cut a few things off of her. I had to improvise because she was wearing little buns on her head, but the character in the game has ponytails. So I did use some air dry clay again to make her ponytails. Normally, I would use Sculpey polymer clay for this, but I wasn't sure if these little figures would do okay in the oven, so I didn't want to risk baking them and ruining them, like melting them, and then I get horrible Louise and Theo where they're all like, whoa. So I did use air dry clay for them. That way I wouldn't have to worry about baking them. I cut out her little bows because Louise is wearing little bows and this figure didn't have any, so I cut out some little bows, and then I used Elmer's glue to glue them on. That can actually also be used to mix with the air dry clay to make it stronger, which is something I learned by accident when I used some air dry clay, messed up what I wanted to do, and I'd already put glue on it, so I mixed it together to see if it'd be okay, and then when it dried, it was like, wow, this is nice. It's nice and tough. So I drew on Theo's eyes while I was waiting for his sister to be dry, and he came out really cute. You can't see it, but his eyebrows almost make him look a little sinister, but I couldn't really fix it at that point because his face is just so small. I was gonna have to paint Louise's legs. She's wearing leggings here, but in the game, she's only wearing a little dress. So I did go ahead and just paint all of her the same flesh tone color. That way she didn't look like she had bronzer on her legs and hands. So I ended up just painting the whole character so that the whole skin tone matched. I originally went with this skin tone color that I had mixed up before, but it kind of just looked a little too dark. And so I put in a little bit of pink, and that kind of pinked it up, made it look a little bit more natural. It was a very light pink, and I put in just a little bit at a time. That way I didn't like put in a whole glob and then it was too pink. But no, putting in a little bit of pink really did lighten it up and make it look a lot better. So I painted her legs, got her all fixed up so that all her skin matched. And then I started on her hair. Now I didn't use acetone to take off her hair color because Louise's hair is kind of a honey blonde or a just regular yellow blonde, but I found that if I painted a normal yellow over the top of the orange, it gave me a really good color effect to where it had more depth. It wasn't just like a flat yellow. It actually made it look almost like real hair, because you know real hair isn't all the same color. And so I really liked that effect, and so I'm glad I didn't acetone her hair off so that I did get that depth without having to try to mix 50,000 colors, doing a dry brush, doing a wash. I didn't have to do any of that. I just painted yellow over her hair a couple times. Now, Louise is a character that you don't see very much in the game. She's in the beginning, and then most of the rest of the demo, Theo is looking for her. He catches glimpses of her here and there, but he can't find her, and you can hear her sometimes too calling for him. I find it very interesting, the bond that him and his sister have. At first, you know, you see pictures at the beginning of the demo where he doesn't seem too thrilled to have a little sister, but then she won't give up and keeps on loving on him like little sisters will, and then you can really sense that they have a good bond, that he's a good big brother who loves his sister and wants to protect her, which is evident in the fact that during the whole game, even though all this scary, horrible stuff is happening to him, he still is looking for his sister. So I did have a nice pink already mixed up for her little dress, and so that got painted on. I did like the effect of how it looked with the little figure sitting down and the dress kind of, you know, bulky, because it really gave a nice effect of when you paint it all, it looks like, you know, her dress would look when she's sitting down with folds and creases and things. So that was nice, especially since the way her figure was sitting, it was going to be really hard to cut off too much of the details without ruining or compromising the figure. As you can see at the this part, I've already added her little pigtails. They look weird here because it looks like her hair's got this white growth. But once I paint it with the yellow, it blends together and then it looks like she just has pigtails instead of buns. And it's came out really nice. I didn't have to sand these figures very much. I was worried maybe I needed to gesso them or something, but no, these little figures, they took the paint really well without any kind of sanding or gesso. I was able to paint just directly on them without much prep other than, cutting off some details. Now, the air dry clay I used for her is actually the Sculpey air dry clay that I found. I didn't even know Sculpey made an air dry. I've always just used their polymer clay, but I really like their air dry clay. I tried 2 kinds of the white. I tried the Fimo and I tried the Sculpey, and I just like the Sculpey better. I felt like the Fimo, you had to use water to get it to smooth out and stick to itself most of the time, and it cracked because you used too much water. But even when you didn't use much water, it still cracked once it was dry. Whereas the Fimo is a little stickier and it sticks to itself better when you're trying to sculpt it. And when it dries, you get a smoother finish, and I just find that it didn't have the tendency to crack as much, if at all, compared to the Fimo. And it was softer to use, and I liked the Sculpey air dry. I would definitely use it again. Now, it doesn't dry with the foamy texture of the colored clay I had because it's just a different kind of air dry clay. It's more your traditional sculpting air dry clay, not the foamy feeling, spongy feeling air dry clay I got of Temu, which I think is supposed to be more modeled after Crayola magic clay. But I like both textures. They both have their purposes. They both have their uses. I would use the Sculpey more for things that I want to do more detail with and have a better structure that's, stiffer. Whereas the modeling clay is just for little details and things that are little figures and things. Little details on the figures. Now, I painted her little shoes, and at this point you can see that her pigtails have been painted fully, so now they're blended better with her hair. In the game, Louise is wearing her little pink dress, and she's got her little brown Mary Janes. I couldn't really paint the Mary Janes very well because her little feet were so small and it was a little awkward. But after I was done painting the brown, I did go in and paint a little strip of flesh tone on there so that it did give it the appearance of a Mary Jane. Here's where I did her collar. Now, her collar was like a lighter pink than the rest of her dress, and it was a little ruffled collar. You can see it when you're looking at the figure in person, but here I don't know that you really could see the full effect of the collar. It just looked like I was painting the dress some more, but I was giving her a collar, and you can see it better in person. It's just the colors are so close here that it's really hard to see on the camera. You can also see my revised flesh tone paint there, and here I am painting her face because, again, I wanted it all to match. The hardest part about these figures, other than cutting off some of the details, was just making sure that when I was painting them, every time I painted one color, I'd have to go back and fix another color because, of course, they're so tiny that even with detailed brushes, I was making some messes. But I think my favorite part to do on these figures was the eyes. I don't know what it is, but I really liked doing the eyes. They have the big, almost anime eyes, and I painted them with white acrylic, and then I went in with the Posca to give the pupils and the highlights. Here I am dry brushing her blush on. The music you hear is from the game because the developer of the game was kind enough to let me use some of his music. He's a really nice guy. He's from France. He will be launching his Kickstarter soon to help fund the rest of the development of his full game, and I definitely suggest you check it out. It's on Steam right now. It is a really nice game so far, and the demo is a really nice long demo, so it's not like some of those where you get like 10 seconds of play and you don't really get a feel for the game. It's a nice long demo, so you get a really nice feel for the game. So here is Theo and Louise finished. I think they came out really well. They look very cute, and I have them on these little stands. I didn't glue them on, I just have them on the little stands because I felt like that would help keep them from getting messed up or anything, and just for display purposes. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.